Hi, I woke up this morning with an earworm and it was M83's outro. You can find it here on YouTube if you don't know the band. The theme was used for the trailer for the movie Cloud Atlas. Now, I love that movie. It's all about how we make the same mistakes again and again in different lives and how to grow through that. And it got me thinking, it's such beautiful music to me. It's kind of soul-lifting music. And I was listening to the words, and then, of course, they annoyed me slightly because they weren't as inspirational as I thought they ought to be for that kind of music. It starts off, the vocal part, saying, "I'm the king of my own land." And I thought, okay, why is that annoying me? What's going on? Where am I not the king of my own land, the monarch of my own land? Let's put the gender aspect of it aside. And it made me think anew. It made me think again. And that's what Kabbalah is all about. Thinking again. It's actually the basic teaching of Jesus and John the Baptist. Metanoia is the word. It's translated as repent, and repent, of course, means think again, but we usually take it as be sorry for what you've done. But it doesn't really mean that. It means think anew, have another thought, pick this up again and remember it. Put it back together the way it needs to be right now. Not the way it needed to be 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago or even last week, but how it needs to be now, which is perfect for a Kabbalistic teacher to understand. So my metanoia about I am the king of my own land took me to Genesis 12:1, which is where Abram's God, this is before Abraham and Sarah, they were Abram and Sarai before they were renamed. That happens a lot, renaming. Some of you may have renamed yourself because you get to a new aspect of life and you need a new aspect of you for it. I just cut my hair, but most people rename themselves. But anyway, what El Shaddai, the living Almighty, who is Abram and Sarah's God, it's not Yahweh, it's not Elohim. At that point, it's El Shaddai, the living Almighty. And this actually is a feminine term for the divine. But I digress. We may get back to that another day. Genesis 12:1, God says, "Go from your country and from your family and from your father's house. Go to a land that I will show you." And this is pivotal in the story of Abraham because it's basically saying, leave everything you know behind and trust, which of course we don't like doing at all. Does Abraham do it? No. He takes Lot, his nephew, and Lot turns out to be major trouble. Right, left and centre, Lot is there, slowing things down, making Abram's life more difficult. And it's a tough teaching, leave the family. It's a very tough teaching. But if we take it as the Kabbalistic view, it doesn't necessarily mean leave all your relatives, though Jesus is quite clear about who is my mother, who are my brothers and sisters. These are not the blood relatives. So he's talking spiritual family. He's talking about spiritual tribe. He's not talking about those basic old patterns that hold us back. So many of our family's patterns come from the fact that it's always been done this way. And because it's always been done this way, it has to be right. Not necessarily. Let's take a bit of metanoia here. Now, if we look at the tree, we'll see that Yesod, which is our family and our tribe, is all about repeating patterns. It's on the bottom of the tree, and if you look at it on the ladder, it's all concerned with the physical world and the lower psyche. And this is where we just go round and round and round and round in our old patterns, but the tree is much more complex than that. And also the tree is a living, breathing thing. It's not just some silly old diagram stuck on a wall. It's basically a clothes horse for you. This is your skeleton. This is the skeleton of the universe. How you dress it is completely up to you. But mostly how we dress it is how we were trained to dress it, how we were trained to be. And here come in the side triads. They're not talked about an awful lot in Kabbalah, certainly not in my tradition of Kabbalah, but they're incredibly important. Because in a nutshell, this side triad here between Binah, Tiferet and Gevurah is the triad of no. This triad here, Tiferet, Chochmah, Hesed, is the triad of yes. They're termed intellectual triads. Astrologically, they are attributed fire, Aries and Sagittarius. So they are about passion and they're about anger and they're about innovation. But this one is basically what you shouldn't do, and this one is what you should do. And they can get very caught up in that. And they feed down the side paths of the tree, down to the lower part, into the great shoulds and should nots. We're very fond of the shoulds and should nots. We just love those. They should be doing this. They should not be doing that. But we don't take it back to the fact that we are the kings of our own land. They aren't. There's another piece in Abraham, it's 13:15 in Genesis, where God says, I will give you all the land that you can see. Now the word there is ro'o. I don't know how you pronounce it, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but it's ro'o in my Strong's Hebrew, and it means perceive. So let's have a look at this. God will give us everything that we can perceive or conceive or see or understand. Which means if we're mad in shoulds and should not and all the family stuff, we're not seeing clearly. We are not the monarch of our own land. And we have to be the monarch of our own land if we are to be one with the Holy One. And the goal of all creation is to express the divine. The Kabbalistic teaching is that the goal of the Kabbalist is to help God behold God, which means that we are physical aspects, representations of the divine on earth, and everything we do matters. Everything we do matters. I have family who say, oh, there's no point in recycling, it's all too late, what can I do? The little bit that I do won't make any difference to the whole world. Well, it makes the difference to the land of which you are monarch. And the land of which you are monarch is your representation of the divine on earth. You and I are God on earth. Each one of us and each being, every aspect of creation is God physically manifested. How it responds to that is completely up to it. Most of nature responds in a pattern way that is in the flow of the universe. It understands everything. Most of humanity resists because we take the idea of being king of our own land as being, I should be right. It's not about that at all. Because when we think that we are right, then we are taking another juicy fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And what that makes us do is blame. These side triads here, below the two intellectual or fiery triads, are the emotional complexes within us. We don't like them. Well, we like this one because that's basically joy. We don't like this one because that's basically sorrow. But there must be sorrow as well as joy. I experienced that one with the death of my father, which I've spoken about before. There was a strange joy in the appropriateness of the time of his death, but there was also sorrow. How these side triads get out of balance is when we focus in on the blame and the victim consciousness around all this kind of thing. They're having joy and I'm not. They're having fun and I'm not. They should be looking after me. They should be looking after the poor. They should be looking after the others. And when they don't, it hurts me. And this one is all about everything should be perfect. Everything should be right. If you did this, everything would work out okay and the joy would flow. But no, that's absolutely not how it works, because you are the monarch of your own land. Everything you perceive returns to you. Everything you perceive through the art is into the spiritual realm, and the spiritual realm will give you back exactly what it is that you perceive. Exactly. Fortunately, there's a bit of a time delay on that, so you can think a really ghastly thought and it won't manifest for you immediately. But the whole of the law of attraction, so Rhonda Byrne wrote that book, The Secret, didn't she? And she said that all of this stuff was hidden from us. But it was in the Bible. It is in the Bible. It's not hidden. It's hidden in plain sight. You just have to look at it and go, okay, what does that mean to me now? How do we update this? How do we get this to work now? Now, the example I want to work on today is the news of the last week or so has been all about Richard Branson and what's his name, Bezos of Amazon, excuse my lack of news knowledge, going into space in a rocket which they funded to look at the planet and then come back down again. And the furore about it is all from these side triads. Now, I get it. Wouldn't it be nice if they spent their billions on alleviating global warming, on developing alternatives to fossil fuels, on feeding the starving? Yes, that would be very nice, wouldn't it? It would. However, the fact that they're not is actually none of our business. They are the kings of their own land. They are prosperous men. We don't like that. And they are doing what they want to do to have fun. And the odd thing about that is, in a very strange way, they're probably benefiting the planet more through their joy, certainly, than the people who are throwing rage, anger and blame at them are, because the rage and the anger and the blame drop the resonance. And when we drop the resonance, we are disconnecting from the divine. In fact, the driver of the 4x4 who hacks me off by blocking my way in the Devon roads, or not knowing how to park, or blocking me when they're picking up their children, is actually probably serving the Holy One better than I, if they are having joy in driving that car. If they're not having joy in driving that car, then they aren't any help whatsoever. But my point not so much is whether or not you think these men should have done it, or whether they shouldn't, they should have, they shouldn't. What my point is, what are you doing to you and to the planet and to your psyche and to the world and to every bit of creation with your anger? Now, righteous anger, that's totally appropriate. I would actually rename it holy anger. Holy anger means no harm to anyone. Holy anger wants to put it right. Jesus used holy anger when he overturned the tables in the temple. He said, this isn't right. Now, if you think those men going into space isn't right, I have some sympathy with your view, and fair enough. But what are you doing yourself in your own land to sort it? They should be feeding the hungry. Are you? They should be developing something that alternates with fossil fuels. Did you buy plastic today? Now, I'm sounding pretty accusatory, but actually it cuts pretty close to the bone when you get to the heart of faith. And the thing about faith is it's the opposite of certainty. These side triads get locked into certainty about what is wrong and what is right. I actually did a sermon at the Methodist church I work at. I'm on the circuit in Devon, on the Methodist circuit. I probably aren't if they see this video, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, I was talking about Jesus healing all the outsiders, the people who were wrong. The people that the Hebrews thought were their enemies, or the unclean, or the dirty, or the rotten, or the prostitutes. Jesus didn't give a rap. Jesus healed the centurion's son or servant. And what I was saying was the word for son or servant by some people has been interpreted as meaning his gay lover. I don't know if that's true, but it's worth positing in this modern world, because we have all these issues about LGBTQ and transgender folk, and we're learning metanoia about gender. And we're learning metanoia about same-sex relationships. The world is moving on because the world has to move on, because stasis is death. When we get locked in these side triads, we are prophesying death. So I said, it is possible that it was even the centurion's gay lover that he healed. And this man in the congregation stood up and went, no! Which was actually very scary, but very good, because it meant that I could institute the idea in the churches where I teach of a debate as well as a sermon. It's not about me pontificating, it's about discussion, and all Kabbalah groups are about discussion. You can't study Kabbalah really without a group. You need to be somewhere so you can rub up against the other and hear a different opinion and update and update and update. But the point of that was Jesus healed the enemy. He healed the servant, the son, or the gay lover, who knows, of the enemy. And the enemy was the equivalent of a Nazi. The enemy was the oppressor who had taken over their land. And Jesus just healed him. So if you think that Richard Branson, Steve Bezos, I think it's Steve Bezos, and Elon Musk and all the very, very wealthy genuinely need healing, learn to be a healer. Pray for them. Pray for them genuinely, as in God's blessing on these men. But if you throw hatred at them, you're throwing hatred right up into Berea, and guess what? It'll come back down to you. It will paralyze life. I know this. I've lived for decades with unacknowledged anger. I was trained as a child, part of my training, you do not show anger. And men can do what they want. That was my childhood training. I'm pretty much out of it nowadays, but I still have a lot of trouble sometimes expressing anger. I will cry rather than be angry because I was trained that that was acceptable in a girl. You can tell what my age is by the childhood I had. However, that was the way it was then. That was the way it was set in stone. But we have to update and change. So it's good for me to realize that there is unexpressed anger in me, and it's good for me to get it out. But it isn't good for me to use it in blame or hatred or projecting it onto the other. What I use is EFT, and you can find lots of that here, which is this tapping thing of when I feel it, or also when I don't feel it, and I think maybe I would be better off feeling it. So I will use EFT because I am the monarch of my own land. Whatever men are doing, or women are doing, or transgender folk are doing, whatever is going off, if people want to go into space in a spaceship, which so many people have pointed out looks like a penis, which makes me chuckle, if they want to do it, it's my reaction that's the problem. And I have to ask myself, what is it in me that is there that I hate, that I am projecting onto them? What is it in me? Is it that I don't seek joy? Is it that I don't use what money I have for happiness and delight and fun? Is it that I don't help the poor myself? Is it that I am expecting them to do everything that I could do? And we can all do just a little bit because we are the monarch of our own land. So today's talk is basically all about metanoia. Think anew. Think anew and understand that if you have rage, if you have anger, if you have blame, it comes from a root in you. It comes from a root that needs to be addressed and healed. And the simplest way to start with that is through EFT, or the Hawaiian tradition of Ho'oponopono, which is the 4 phrases: I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. Now, we're originally taught that you're saying those to God, but a lot of us have had such troublesome relationships with God, thinking God being blaming and horrible, that we don't want to say it to God. But I think actually what you're doing is saying it to your internal system. You're saying it to these rules and regulations. You're saying it to this pain and this addictive pleasure, because when this side goes wrong, it becomes addiction. And I know that one too well. It's far too easy to sit down and binge watch The West Wing than it is to actually do something about addressing political iniquities that I think I have seen. Am I going to actually stand up and campaign? Am I going to stand up and do it? Or am I going to drown my sorrows in some other joy? I am not any kind of guru. Please understand, every time I rant, it's talking to me before it's talking to you. We are the monarch of our own land. Yes, we are in situations perhaps that are incredibly difficult. And I know people are going to say, well, these people oppress others, their workforces aren't looked after properly, some people are sick, they can't change their reality, they can't do this, they can't do that. And I will say from heart, soul and gut, there is a saying: 2 men looked out through the prison bars, one saw mud and the other saw stars. Go out tonight and look up. And if there are no stars, go out tomorrow and look up. Keep looking at those stars, because in the stars is the emptiness, the nothingness that is actually full. The Hubble telescope, pointed at the most empty part of the universe, came up with 1,000 galaxies. When we will give ourselves the time to go within, to sit with our anger, to sit with our rage, to allow it, to just say, what are you telling me? What is going on with me? How do I heal that? And say to yourself, I love you, I'm sorry, Please forgive me. Thank you. Yesod hears it, because Yesod doesn't actually know that anybody else exists but me. It simply doesn't. It's all focused on me. We don't know that these men who went up in rockets actually exist. We've got information, we've got pictures, but we've never met them. There's no experience. And the answer comes from experience. Experiencing the rage, experiencing inside, allowing it to come in. Because once we allow it, that's new, and it moves up to Tiferet. And we can see more clearly what's going on in me. It may be that we cannot pick up our bed and walk. It may be that we're still going to have those hot flushes. It may be that we still have cancer. It may be that we still have a heart disease. But we will change our land. And every day, if we can change our land one iota, iota is the letter I in Greek. It's the smallest letter. One tiny thing in our own somewhat small land changes everything. And that is the answer.